A little girl warns Millionaire. The brakes won't work. He jumps from the car. Before we get started, drop a comment if you think love in action still matters. Enjoy the story. In Millfield's quiet suburb, the Blake residence held secrets beneath its perfect exterior. Lucas Blake, 42-year-old CEO of an electric car company, had built his fortune on precision and data. But 2 years after cancer took his wife Sarah, precision couldn't fill the void in their home or bridge the growing distance between him and 8-year-old Chloe. Chloe sat at breakfast, watching her father scroll through emails, his coffee growing cold. Their routine had become parallel lives, same space, worlds apart. "Dad, are you testing the new car today?" she asked. Lucas glanced up with a distracted smile. "Yes, sweetheart. The Artemis prototype needs final tests before investor presentations." Chloe nodded, returning to her drawing, a detailed brake system sketch. Most children drew flowers. Chloe drew technical diagrams from her father's office. She understood, more than adults realized, noticing details they missed. "The brake lines look different in your car," she said quietly, but Lucas was already standing. "I'll be late tonight. Nina's making dinner." Nina. The name knotted Chloe's stomach. Nina Morrison had entered their lives 6 months ago, beautiful, charming, everything her father seemed to need. She brought flowers, asked about school, appeared perfect. But children see differently. They notice when smiles don't reach eyes, when questions feel rehearsed, when someone tries too hard. Chloe's mother used to say, "Sometimes our hearts know things our minds haven't figured out yet." Nina's presence left Chloe feeling more isolated. Her father, desperate for companionship, threw himself into this relationship with business-like intensity. Love, he'd convinced himself, was another problem to solve. As Lucas headed to the garage, Chloe folded her drawing and tucked it away. Something was wrong. She could feel it like an approaching storm. The garage held Lucas's prized possessions, his daily Tesla and the Artemis prototype representing 3 years of innovation. The Artemis was designed to be the world's safest vehicle, with breakthrough technology that could save thousands of lives. Chloe watched her father's final checks: tire pressure, fluid levels, dashboard diagnostics. Everything appeared normal. But appearances, her mother had warned, could deceive. "Ready?" "To change the world, sweetheart," Lucas called out. Chloe forced a smile, but the knot tightened. Today felt charged with unnamed energy. As her father prepared to leave, she studied every detail, her young mind processing information that would prove invaluable. The stage was set for a day that would test everything the Blakes believed about: trust, truth, and family bonds. Have you ever had that feeling something wasn't right, even when everything appeared normal? That intuition might be protecting us from danger we can't yet see. The testing facility's 50 acres stretched before them as Chloe watched from the observation building. Lucas was conducting final preparations with Alex Martinez, his loyal chief engineer, but even from a distance, Chloe could see Alex's troubled expression. "Daddy looks happy," Nina observed beside her, voice carrying that manufactured sweetness. "Alex doesn't," Chloe replied quietly. Nina's laugh sounded artificial. "Alex always worries. That's why your father values him." But Chloe knew genuine alarm when she saw it. The night before, unable to sleep, she'd crept downstairs and glimpsed Nina at Lucas's computer, fingers moving with surprising familiarity. When noticed, Nina had smiled and said, "Just checking email." But something felt rehearsed. Now those fragments crystallized into urgency. "I need to talk to Daddy," she announced, heading for the stairs. "Sweetheart, he's busy," Nina called. But Chloe was already running. She burst through the doors as Lucas climbed into the Artemis. The prototype hummed quietly, its electric motor barely whispering. Alex stood nearby with his tablet, expression still troubled. "Dad!" "Wait!" Chloe called out, running toward the car. Lucas paused, surprised. "Chloe? What are you doing down here?" She reached the window, breathless but driven by urgency. "Dad, I saw the brake cable cut. I don't think the brakes are working." Lucas's expression shifted to gentle amusement. Sweetheart, this car has electronic brakes, no cables to cut. It's completely unhackable. But Alex's face paled visibly, his tablet trembling. His eyes darted between the car and something troubling on his screen. Plus, Lucas continued, patting her head, Nina's been helping with security. Everything's perfectly safe. The mention of Nina chilled Chloe. She spotted Nina watching from the building, too far to hear but close enough to see something was happening. But Dad? Chloe began, wanting to explain about the access codes, Nina's activities, the details that didn't align. I know you worry, Lucas interrupted gently. Since Mom died, you've tried to protect everyone, but this time trust that everything's under control. Alex cleared his throat. Lucas, about those system logs. Later, Alex. We're on schedule. Chloe stepped back, feeling familiar helplessness. Adults dismissed children's concerns, translating fear into innocence, but as her father drove away, every instinct screamed danger. The prototype disappeared around the first curve. Alex stood beside her, staring at his tablet, face masked with professional conflict. Whatever he'd discovered challenged their security, beliefs. As the taillights vanished, Chloe made a decision. She couldn't stand by and do nothing. Time was running out, and the adult seemed determined to ignore the warning signs blazing in her mind. Sometimes people dismiss our concerns because they want everything to be okay. When should we trust that voice that whispers, something's wrong? Like and subscribe for stories that honor unexpected wisdom. Alex Martinez had spent 15 years spotting problems before they became catastrophes. Staring at security logs on his tablet, the facts painted a terrifying picture. Timestamp, 2:47 a.m. Someone accessed the Artemis brake systems using administrative credentials, making subtle but deadly modifications. The changes suggested sophisticated knowledge, elegant sabotage designed to fail at the worst moment. What's wrong? Chloe asked, appearing beside him. Most adults would ask if everything was okay, giving room to deflect. Children cut straight to truth. I'm not sure yet, Alex admitted, fingers flying across his tablet attempting remote override. If I can establish communication, I might reverse the modifications. But who had administrative access at 2:47 a.m.? The log showed internal network access with legitimate codes. This wasn't external hacking. This was betrayal from within. Chloe pulled out her folded drawing. Is this how the brakes should look? Alex stared, amazed by the technical accuracy. Chloe had captured the Artemis braking system with remarkable understanding. Where did you learn this? I watched Daddy work. I remember things. This is how it looked on his screen last night, but the numbers were different. Alex's blood ran cold. Modified brake schematics on Lucas's home computer meant someone with intimate access was compromising confidential data. His tablet chimed. Artemis approaching Section 3, mountain curves, all systems normal. But Alex knew better. The sabotage would show normal until braking was required. The modifications programmed failure at the worst possible moment. Chloe, when you saw those numbers, was anyone else around? She concentrated, replaying the scene. Nina was there. She said she was checking email, but she was typing a lot. Alex's worst fears crystallized. Nina Morrison had charmed her way into their circle, gaining access to secrets and systems. He'd never liked her. Something felt calculated, but assumed. His discomfort was protective instinct. Now he realized his instincts warned of something deadly. We need to warn your father, Alex said, reaching for his radio. Everything all right? Nina approached from the building, smile bright and concerned. Routine technical checks, Alex replied carefully, hiding his screen. I saw Chloe run down so urgently. I hope she's not worrying unnecessarily. The subtle emphasis on unnecessarily made Alex's protective instincts flare. He stepped closer to Chloe, positioning himself between child and potential killer. Children notice things adults miss, Alex said evenly. Oh, absolutely, though sometimes they misinterpret what they see. Adult situations can be confusing. The words sounded reasonable but carried warning. Nina was establishing narrative, preparing explanations for inconvenient observations. "Daddy's been gone a long time," Chloe said quietly. Alex checked his watch. 15 minutes, enough time to reach the most dangerous section. If the brakes were programmed to fail during high-stress scenarios, the mountain curves would provide perfect trigger. Radio crackled. "Artemis entering final approach to Section 4, Devil's Hairpin, speed 45 miles per hour, Devil's Hairpin." Alex's mouth went dry. The track's most dangerous curve, sharp switchback with steep drop-off requiring precise braking and complete trust in safety systems. "I need to contact him immediately," Alex said. Nina's hand touched his arm. "Let's not create unnecessary panic. I'm sure Lucas knows what he's doing." The contact felt electric with menace. Alex understood he faced someone capable of watching a man die while maintaining perfect composure. Someone who had infiltrated their most intimate spaces to orchestrate this moment. Chloe looked between the adults, processing tension building like atmospheric pressure before a storm. "Something bad is going to happen," she said with startling clarity. Alex realized an 8-year-old had seen truth all the adults missed. The question was whether they could act before it was too late. Radio crackled. "Artemis beginning descent into Devil's Hairpin." Time was running out. Neighbors who pay attention aren't being nosy. They're showing love in action. When have you been grateful for someone who cared enough to notice? Clara Benedetti had lived in Millfield for 37 years, long enough to know that the quiet suburban neighborhood held more secrets than its manicured lawns suggested. At 58, the Italian-born widow had developed what her late husband called a healthy curiosity about her neighbors' affairs. Others might have called it nosiness, but Clara preferred to think of herself as the neighborhood's unofficial guardian angel. This morning, however, her curiosity was about to save a life. She was watering her prized tomato plants when Chloe Blake appeared at her front door, breathless and clearly agitated. Clara had watched the little girl grow up from her kitchen window, noting how the child had become increasingly withdrawn since her mother's death. Today, though, Chloe's eyes held a desperate urgency that immediately captured Clara's attention. "Mrs. Benedetti," Chloe gasped, still catching her breath from running the 3 blocks from the testing facility to Clara's house. "I need to show you something about the cameras." Clara dried her hands on her gardening apron, studying the child's flushed face. "Slow down, Bambina. What cameras?" "The security cameras you have watching your driveway," Chloe explained rapidly. "They can see into our garage, can't they? I need to know what happened last night." Clara's eyebrows rose with interest. She did indeed have a comprehensive security system, installed after a series of break-ins the previous year. And yes, one camera did have a clear view of the Blake family's garage area. But what could possibly drive a child to seek such information? "Come inside," Clara said, opening her door wider. "Tell me what's troubling you." In Clara's cozy living room, surrounded by family photographs and the lingering scent of this morning's espresso, Chloe poured out her story. She spoke of strange codes on her father's computer, of Nina's late-night activities, of brake systems that didn't look right, and adults who wouldn't listen to her warnings. Clara listened with the patience of someone who had raised 3 children of her own. Recognizing the difference between childish fantasy and genuine concern, Chloe's account was too detailed, too technically specific to be dismissed as imagination. "You think this Nina person did something to your father's car?" Clara asked gently. "I know she did," Chloe said with startling conviction. "And I think it's happening right now while he's testing the car." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. If the child was right, they might be dealing with something far more serious than neighborhood drama. She led Chloe to her small home office where multiple computer monitors displayed feeds from various security cameras. "Here," Clara said, pulling up the previous night's recordings. "This camera has a good view of your garage area. What time should we look at?" "Around 2:30 in the morning," Chloe said, climbing onto a chair to get a better view of the screens. Clara's fingers moved expertly across the keyboard, fast-forwarding through hours of empty footage until the timestamp showed 2:30 a.m. For several minutes nothing happened. Then, At 2:43 a.m., a figure appeared in the Blake family garage. Even in the grainy infrared footage, Nina Morrison was clearly recognizable. She moved with purpose and surprising technical competence, accessing panels on the Artemis prototype that most people wouldn't even know existed. She worked for nearly 20 minutes, her actions deliberate and practiced. "Madonna mia," Clara whispered, using the Italian expression that escaped her lips in moments of shock. Chloe leaned forward, pointing at the screen. "See? She's doing something to the brake computer. Just like I told Dad, but he wouldn't listen." Clara zoomed in on the footage, watching Nina's methodical sabotage of the prototype safety systems. The woman clearly knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't random vandalism, but sophisticated industrial sabotage requiring intimate knowledge of the vehicle's design. "We need to call the police," Clara said, reaching for her phone. "There's no time," Chloe said urgently. "Dad is testing the car right now. He's going to drive down the mountain road, and when he tries to stop..." The implication hung in the air like a death sentence. Clara had driven that mountain road countless times. She knew exactly how steep and dangerous it could be, especially in a vehicle with compromised brakes. "Can we call him directly?" Clara asked. "Alex is trying, but Dad doesn't answer his phone. During technical tests," Chloe explained, her voice beginning to crack with fear. "He says it's too distracting." Clara's mind raced through possibilities. She could call the emergency dispatcher, but explaining the situation would take precious minutes they didn't have. She could drive to the testing facility, but that would take at least 15 minutes in traffic. Then she remembered something that might help. "My son Marco works for the County Traffic Management Center," she said, already dialing his number. "They have emergency override capabilities for the radio systems." While Clara spoke rapidly in Italian to her son, explaining the urgent situation, Chloe stared at the frozen security footage. Nina's image filled the screen, captured in the act of betraying the trust of a man who had opened his heart and home to her. "Marco can patch us through to the testing facility's emergency frequency," Clara announced, hanging up the phone. "But, Bambina, are you absolutely certain about what we saw?" Chloe nodded solemnly. "My mom used to say that when you know something is true, you have to act on it, even if other people don't believe you." Clara felt a wave of protective affection for this remarkable child who had somehow managed to see through an elaborate deception that had fooled all the adults around her. Sometimes wisdom came in the smallest packages. The radio crackled to, "Ife, this is County Traffic Control patching through an emergency call to Blake Testing Facility. Please respond immediately," a voice answered. "This is Blake Testing. What's the nature of the emergency?" Clara took the microphone, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "This is Clara Benedetti, a neighbor of Lucas Blake. I have video evidence that his vehicle has been sabotaged. You need to stop the test immediately." There was a moment of silence before the voice responded. "Ma'am, are you saying the Artemis prototype has been tampered with?" "Yes," Clara said firmly. "The brake systems have been deliberately disabled. Mr. Blake is in immediate danger." Another voice cut in, Alex Martinez, his words tight with panic. "We've been trying to reach him by radio, but he's not responding. The prototype is approaching the Devil's Hairpin curve in approximately 2 minutes." Chloe grabbed the microphone. "Alex? It's Chloe. You have to override the brake computer remotely. The access codes Nina used last night. Can you reverse what she did?" "I'm trying," Alex's voice came back, strained with concentration. "But the modifications are more sophisticated than I initially realized. She really knew our systems." Clara and Chloe exchanged looks of growing horror. Even with their evidence and Alex's technical expertise, they might not be able to prevent the disaster that Nina had so carefully orchestrated. The radio fell silent except for the static of open channels and the distant sound of emergency preparations at the testing facility. Somewhere on a mountain road, Lucas Blake was racing toward a curve that might be the last turn of his life. And the only thing standing between him and catastrophe was an 8-year-old girl's stubborn refusal to be ignored. Sometimes our greatest strength comes not from what we know, but from whom we choose to trust. When have you chosen heart over logic? Lucas Blake had always found peace in the precise mechanics of driving. Behind the wheel of the Artemis prototype, surrounded by 3 years of innovation and engineering excellence, he felt the familiar satisfaction of human ambition made manifest, in steel, circuitry, and revolutionary design. The mountain testing course stretched before him like a ribbon of possibility, each curve and elevation change designed to push both vehicle and driver to their limits. This morning, the autumn air was crisp and clear, perfect conditions for the final evaluation that would determine whether the Artemis was ready for public presentation. At 45 miles per hour, the prototype handled like a dream. The electric motor's instant torque delivery, the precision-weighted steering, the advanced suspension system. Everything responded exactly as his engineering team had intended. Lucas allowed himself a moment of pride, thinking about the investors who would witness this technology next week, the lives that would be saved by the Artemis's revolutionary safety features. His radio crackled with routine updates from the testing facility. Artemis approaching Section 2 checkpoint. All systems nominal. Copy that, Lucas responded, his attention already shifting to the challenging curves ahead. The Devil's Hairpin, Section 4 of the course, was designed to simulate emergency braking scenarios. It required split-second timing and complete faith in the vehicle's safety systems. Complete faith, the phrase echoed in his mind, bringing with it an unexpected image of Chloe's face pressed against the car window, her small voice urgent with warning. I don't think the brakes are working. Lucas shook his head, dismissing the memory. Children, worried, especially children who had already lost one parent. Chloe's concerns, while touching, stemmed from fear rather than technical knowledge. The Artemis had been designed by the best engineers in the industry, tested and retested under every conceivable scenario. The radio interrupted his thoughts. Lucas, this is Alex. Please respond immediately. Something in his chief engineer's tone sent a chill through Lucas. Alex wasn't prone to dramatics. If he sounded urgent, there was usually good reason. I'm here, Alex. What's the problem? We need you to abort the test and return to base immediately. Alex's voice came back, tight with stress. We've discovered irregularities in the brake management system. Lucas frowned, glancing at his dashboard display. Every indicator showed green. Brake pressure, electronic systems, emergency backups. All normal, just as they should be. Everything looks good from here, Lucas replied. What kind of irregularities? There was a pause before Alex responded, and Lucas could hear other voices in the background, urgent conversations he couldn't quite make out. Lucas, listen carefully. Someone accessed the brake control software last night using administrative credentials. The modifications are subtle, but they're designed to cause system failure under high-stress braking scenarios. The words hit Lucas like a physical blow. Sabotage. Someone had deliberately tampered with the Artemis, turning his greatest achievement into a potential death trap. But who would do such a thing? And how had they gained access to secured systems? That's impossible, Lucas said, even as his mind began racing through the implications. The security protocols have been compromised, Alex interrupted. Lucas, you need to very carefully bring the vehicle to a stop using minimal braking force. Do not attempt any sudden stops or emergency maneuvers. Lucas felt sweat beginning to bead on his forehead, despite the cool mountain air flowing through the prototype's vents. He was currently traveling at 45 miles per hour on a mountain road with limited shoulder space and steep drop-offs on both sides. Bringing the vehicle to a safe stop would require precise use of the very systems that might have been sabotaged. How? Do I know the modifications haven't already activated? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Based on the programming, the failure should only trigger during hard braking events, Alex explained. As long as you avoid sudden stops, you should be okay. Should be. The qualifier offered little comfort as Lucas surveyed the road ahead. The Devil's Hairpin was approaching, a sharp switchback that normally required significant braking to navigate safely. If Alex was right about the sabotage, that curve could become his executioner. Another voice cut in on the radio, a woman he didn't recognize. Mr. Blake, this is Clara Benedetti, your neighbor. I have security camera footage of someone tampering. with your car last night at 2:43 a.m. Clara Benedetti. Lucas remembered her, the Italian woman who lived 3 houses down, known for her beautiful garden and friendly waves. But what could she possibly know about his situation? "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but—" "It was Nina," Clara's voice interrupted, clear and certain. "I have video of her sabotaging your brake systems." The words hit Lucas like a sledgehammer, to the chest. Nina. The woman he'd fallen in love with. The person he'd trusted with his heart and his home. The woman who had been sleeping in his bed, eating at his table, helping to raise his daughter. "That's impossible," he whispered. But even as he spoke, pieces of a terrible puzzle began clicking into place. Nina's intimate knowledge of his work, schedule. Her interest in his computer systems, which he'd attributed to natural curiosity. Her presence during technical discussions, always listening carefully to details about security protocols and system vulnerabilities. Her remarkable ability to anticipate his needs and desires, perhaps because she'd been studying him like a target rather than loving him like a partner. Then he heard another voice on the radio, small and urgent, and absolutely certain. "Daddy, it's Chloe. I tried to warn you. Nina cut the brake cables. Well, not cables, but the computer part that controls them. I saw her do it." His daughter's voice cut through his shock like a blade. Chloe had tried to tell him. His 8-year-old daughter had seen the truth that he, in his desperate loneliness and need for companionship, had been blind to. The devil's hairpin loomed ahead, its sharp curve demanding immediate decision. Lucas could see the warning signs, the guardrails that were all that stood between the road and a 100-foot drop into rocky terrain. At his current speed, he would reach the curve in less than 30 seconds. "Alex," he said into the radio, his voice surprisingly calm. "If I don't brake for this curve, I'm going off the mountain. Can you downshift? Use engine braking?" "It's an electric vehicle, Alex. No transmission to downshift." The silence on the radio spoke volumes. Everyone, listening, understood the math. Without functional brakes, the laws of physics became inescapable. The Artemis was carrying too much speed to make the turn safely, and there was no room for error on the narrow mountain road. Lucas thought about Chloe, about the trust he'd broken by dismissing her concerns. He thought about the company he'd built, the employees who depended on him, the innovations that would die with him if he didn't survive this moment. Most of all, he thought about Nina. Beautiful, charming Nina, who had apparently orchestrated his death with the same precision he brought to engineering. "Lucas," Alex's voice came through the static, "there might be one option. If the sabotage only affects the primary braking system, the emergency brake might still function. It operates on a separate circuit. The emergency brake, a system designed for parking and minor adjustments, not for stopping a vehicle traveling at highway speeds. Using it at 45 miles per hour would likely cause the car to skid or flip, but it might be better than sailing off a cliff if—" "This doesn't work," Lucas said into the radio. "Tell Chloe that her father should have listened to her. Tell her that she was right about everything." The devil's hairpin rushed toward him like destiny itself, demanding a choice between certain death and almost certain death. Lucas's hand moved toward the emergency brake, knowing that the next few seconds would determine whether his daughter would grow up as an orphan or as a girl whose father had finally learned to trust her wisdom. In the background of the radio transmission, he could hear Chloe's voice, small and fierce and unafraid. "You can do it, Daddy. I believe in you." And for the first time in 2 years, Lucas Blake chose to have faith in something other than technology and engineering. He chose to have faith in love. In our darkest moments, salvation sometimes comes from unexpected voices. Who in your life offers wisdom you might be overlooking? Time crystallized into fragments of clarity as Lucas Blake faced the devil's hairpin curve at 45 miles per hour, with potentially sabotaged brakes. The Artemis prototype, 3 years of innovation and dreams made manifest, had become a missile hurtling toward a decision point that would determine whether he lived to see his daughter grow up. His hand hovered over the emergency brake, calculating odds that shifted with each passing millisecond. The curve ahead demanded precise braking. Exactly the scenario that Alex had warned would trigger the sabotaged systems. But doing nothing meant carrying too much speed into a turn that physics would not forgive. Emergency brake is your only option. Alex's voice crackled through the radio, tight with professional analysis and personal fear. Lucas could picture his chief engineer at the testing facility, surrounded by monitors and technical readouts that couldn't capture the human reality of this moment. Alex understood the mathematics of the situation, but he wasn't sitting behind the wheel of a potentially compromised vehicle, feeling the road vibrations through the steering wheel, sensing the car's weight and momentum with the intuition that came from years of driving. 20 seconds to the curve. "Daddy, you have to jump." Chloe's voice cut through the radio transmission like a knife, stunning everyone listening with its stark simplicity. While the adults calculated probabilities and debated technical solutions, an 8-year-old had identified the one option nobody else had voiced. "Sweetheart, I can't just..." Lucas began, but her voice interrupted him. "Yes, you can. Like in the movies. Open the door and jump." The suggestion was absurd, impossible, reckless, and potentially the only thing that might save his life. Lucas glanced at the speedometer. 43 miles per hour. Jumping from a vehicle at that speed would likely cause serious injury, but staying with a car that couldn't stop before a cliff would guarantee death. 15 seconds. He could see the curve now, the way the road surface disappeared around a bend that was engineered for much slower speeds. The guardrail looked fragile, designed more for marking the road's edge than for stopping a runaway vehicle. Beyond it, empty air and jagged rocks waited with mathematical certainty. "Lucas," Alex's voice came through again. "If you're going to use the emergency brake, do it now. You need maximum distance to slow down." But Lucas found himself thinking not about stopping distances and braking coefficients, but about trust. For 2 years, he'd dismissed his daughter's intuition, explaining away her concerns with adult logic and engineering expertise. She'd tried to warn him about Nina, about something feeling wrong in their carefully reconstructed family life. She'd noticed details that his desperate loneliness had made him ignore. Now, facing the consequences of misplaced trust, her voice offered a solution that was simultaneously terrifying and oddly logical. Children approached problems differently than adults. They weren't constrained by conventional thinking or professional protocols. Sometimes that led to naive mistakes, but sometimes it led to breakthrough insights that sophisticated minds missed. 10 seconds. Lucas's hand moved away from the emergency brake and toward the door handle. The Artemis prototype was equipped with advanced safety systems, but they assumed a driver who remained in the vehicle. No engineer had designed protocols for voluntary ejection at highway speeds. "What are you doing?" Alex's voice demanded. "Trusting, my daughter," Lucas replied, reaching for his seatbelt release. The radio exploded with voices, Alex protesting, Clara gasping, other technicians shouting warnings about the dangers of jumping from a moving vehicle. But through it all, Lucas heard Chloe's voice clear and certain. "I love you, Daddy. You can do this." 5 seconds. Lucas released his seatbelt and gripped the door handle, feeling the wind resistance that would make opening it a struggle. The Artemis was designed for aerodynamic efficiency, which worked against him now as he fought to create an opening for escape. The door opened with surprising suddenness, wind rushing into the cabin with a roar that drowned out the radio chatter. Cold mountain air whipped around him as he positioned himself for what might be either salvation or suicide. 3 seconds. He could see the exact point where the road curved sharply to the right, while the car's momentum would carry it straight ahead into empty space. The mathematics were inescapable now. Staying with the vehicle meant certain death, while jumping offered uncertain survival. Lucas thought about Chloe's drawing of the brake system, her careful attention to details that adults had missed. He thought about her warnings, dismissed with paternal condescension. He thought about Nina's late-night computer activities, explained away as innocent interest in his work. An 8-year-old had seen the truth that a 42-year-old CEO had missed. Perhaps it was time to trust her judgment about other things
as well. 2 seconds. Daddy, now.
Chloe's voice cut through the wind noise, urgent with love and terrifying clarity. Lucas could see the curve's apex approaching like a doorway between life and death. In 1 second, the decision would be made for him. He jumped. The world exploded into chaos, tumbling, scraping, rolling contact with asphalt that felt like being attacked by the road itself. His body became a projectile governed by physics rather than will, bouncing and sliding across the mountain road with impacts that sent shockwaves through every bone and muscle. Pain bloomed everywhere at once, but consciousness remained. Lucas rolled to a stop on the rocky shoulder, just as the Artemis prototype reached the Devil's Hairpin curve, carrying its full speed into the turn that demanded precision braking. For a frozen moment, the car seemed to hang in the air, defying gravity through momentum alone. Then physics reclaimed its authority, pulling the beautiful piece of technology down into the rocky canyon below. The explosion, when it came, was smaller than the movies suggested, but final in a way that made Lucas's body shake with more than just shock from his injuries. The Artemis prototype, 3 years of work, millions in investment, countless hours of engineering genius, was gone in seconds. But he was alive. The radio, somehow still functioning despite his violent exit from the vehicle, crackled with voices, calling his name. Alex, Clara, emergency responders, and through it all, Chloe's voice. "Daddy! Daddy! Can you hear me?" "I'm here," Lucas managed to say, his voice rough from the impact but unmistakably alive. "I'm okay." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Cheers from the testing facility, Clara's emotional Italian exclamations, Alex's professional relief mixed with personal joy. But the voice that mattered most was small and fierce and absolutely certain of her father's survival. "I knew you could do it," Chloe said through the radio. "I knew you would listen." As emergency vehicles approached from both directions, their sirens echoing off the mountain walls, Lucas Blake lay on the rocky shoulder and understood that his daughter had just saved his life in more ways than one. She'd warned him about the sabotage, suggested the escape plan, and most importantly, forced him to confront the truth about where he'd placed his trust. The hardest lesson wasn't about automotive engineering or corporate security. It was about learning to listen to the people who loved him most, even when they were 8 years old and spoke truths that adults didn't want to hear. Evil often hides behind beautiful faces and sweet words. But children sense when love isn't genuine. Have you ever felt that way about someone perfect on the surface? The Blake family villa had never felt so much like a trap as it did at 3 o'clock that afternoon. News of the accident had traveled fast through the company grapevine. Lucas Blake, CEO and founder, injured in a prototype vehicle crash during routine testing. The official story, carefully crafted by corporate communications, mentioned mechanical failure and emergency procedures, but nothing about sabotage or attempted murder. Nina Morrison moved through the house with practiced efficiency, her beautiful face composed in an expression of appropriate concern, while her hands systematically gathered personal belongings. She'd perfected the art of appearing devoted while preparing for betrayal, and today's performance was her masterpiece. In the guest bedroom that had gradually become her unofficial space over the past 6 months, Nina packed designer clothes and expensive jewelry with the methodical precision of someone executing a long-planned exit strategy. Each item represented careful investment in the role she'd played, the grieving widower's perfect girlfriend, understanding and supportive and utterly devoted to his happiness. She paused at Lucas's closet, running her fingers along the expensive suits that represented everything she'd tried to destroy. Blake Industries had been more than just a romantic target. It was a stepping stone to the kind of wealth and influence that could reshape her entire future. The Artemis prototype represented millions in potential profits, and her employer had been very specific about ensuring those profits flowed to the right company. Industrial espionage wrapped in a love story. It was almost poetic in its efficiency. The sound of a car door slamming in the driveway made her freeze. According to her information, Lucas was still at the hospital undergoing observation for his injuries. Nobody should be arriving at the house, especially not in the middle of her carefully timed departure. She moved to the window, peering through expensive curtains at the scene below. A county sheriff's vehicle sat in the circular driveway, its occupant already walking toward the front door with the deliberate pace of official business. Nina's mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps they were conducting routine follow-up interviews about the accident. Maybe Lucas had sent them to check on the house's security. Whatever the reason, she couldn't afford to be caught in the middle of packing suspicious items. She quickly closed the suitcase and shoved it under the bed, then smoothed her hair and adopted the expression of worried girlfriend that had served her so well over the past months. By the time the doorbell rang, she was already composing her performance. "Officers," she said, opening the door with just the right mixture of surprise and concern. "Is there news about Lucas? Is he going to be okay?" But instead of uniformed police, she found herself facing Alex Martinez and Clara Benedetti, both wearing expressions that made her blood run cold. Behind them stood a county investigator whose presence suggested this wasn't a social call. "Nina Morrison?" the investigator asked, consulting a small notebook. "Yes," she replied carefully, her mind already shifting to defensive strategies. "I'm Lucas Blake's friend. We've been very worried about the accident." "That's interesting," Alex said, his voice carrying none of the deference she'd grown accustomed to from Lucas's employees. "Because we have evidence suggesting it wasn't an accident at all." Clara stepped forward, her maternal face hardened with protective anger. "We have video footage of you tampering with Mr. Blake's car last night. Everything you did is recorded on my security cameras." Nina felt the foundation of her carefully constructed world beginning to crack. Security cameras. She'd been so focused on the technical aspects of sabotaging the vehicle that she'd never considered surveillance from neighboring properties. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," she said, forcing her voice to remain calm and reasonable. "I would never do anything to hurt Lucas. I love him." But even as she spoke, more vehicles were pulling into the driveway. Police cars, an evidence collection van, and finally, a familiar black sedan that made her heart sink completely. Lucas Blake emerged from the passenger seat, his left arm in a sling and a bandage visible on his forehead, but very much alive and very much aware of what had happened. Beside him, holding his good hand with fierce protectiveness, walked Chloe. The 8-year-old's eyes met Nina's through the open doorway, and in that moment, Nina understood that her most dangerous opponent had never been corporate security or competitive intelligence. It had been a child who noticed things that adults missed. "Hello, Nina," Lucas said, his voice carrying a weight she'd never heard before. "I think we need to talk." The group moved into the living room, the same space where Nina had played her role as loving girlfriend for months, bringing flowers for the mantel, cooking dinners for the family, gradually inserting herself into every aspect of their reconstructed life. "The evidence is quite comprehensive," the investigator explained, opening a tablet to display Clara's security footage. "We have video of Ms. Morrison accessing the vehicle's computer systems at 2:43 a.m., technical logs showing unauthorized modifications to the brake management software, and testimony from multiple witnesses regarding suspicious behavior." Nina watched her sabotage play out on the screen, seeing herself through the electronic eyes that had captured her betrayal. The footage was damning, but more devastating was the expression on Lucas's face as he witnessed the systematic destruction of his trust. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Was any of it real? The relationship, the love, the way you cared for Chloe?" For a moment, Nina considered maintaining her performance. She could claim temporary insanity, romantic desperation, corporate pressure beyond her control. The lawyers would craft a defense based on diminished capacity or economic coercion. But looking at Chloe's young face, seeing the mixture of hurt and vindication in her eyes, Nina found herself speaking the truth for perhaps the first time since entering their lives. "It was a job," she said simply. "Blake Industries was developing technology that my employer wanted to acquire. They needed someone to get close to you, to access your systems, to ensure that the Artemis prototype never reached market." "Who?" Alex demanded. "Who hired you?" Nina smiled, but there was no warmth in it anymore. Someone who understood that industrial competition requires core creative solutions. Someone who knew that the best way to destroy a company is to eliminate its leadership. The words hung in the air like poison, confirming what everyone had begun to suspect. This hadn't been simple sabotage but attempted murder disguised as mechanical failure. "You tried to kill my father," Chloe said, her small voice cutting through the adult conversation with startling clarity. Nina looked at the child who had seen through her performance from the beginning, recognizing intelligence that surpassed most adults she'd encountered. "You were the problem," she admitted. "From the first day I met you, you saw something the others missed. I could never quite convince you." "Because you're not a good person," Chloe replied with devastating simplicity. As the investigators began the formal arrest procedures, Nina found herself thinking about the irony of her situation. She'd spent months manipulating a man's grief and loneliness, exploiting his trust and affection for corporate gain. She'd succeeded in accessing his most sensitive systems, in sabotaging his greatest achievement, in very nearly orchestrating his death. But she'd been undone by an 8-year-old girl who simply paid attention to details and trusted her instincts about the adults around her. The handcuffs felt cold against her wrists, but not as cold as the realization that her greatest failure hadn't been technical or strategic. It had been underestimating the power of a child's love for her father. Healing begins when we stop making excuses and start making changes. When we choose to listen instead of dismissing. What relationships might benefit from this honest reckoning? The Blake home felt different following Nina's arrest. Not just emptier, but lighter, as if poison had been drawn from the air itself. Lucas stood in his study, looking at the computer where Nina had accessed sensitive files, wondering how he'd been so blind. Police investigation moved swiftly once Clara's footage provided evidence. Nina Morrison, real name Nina Castellano, worked for Meridian Automotive, Blake Industries' primary competitor. FBI analysis revealed sophisticated operation designed to steal technology while eliminating leadership. But criminal charges were only part of needed healing. "Dad?" Chloe appeared in the doorway, small frame silhouetted against hallway light. She'd been quieter since the arrest, processing reality that someone she'd lived with had tried killing her father. "Come here, sweetheart," Lucas said, opening his arms. Chloe climbed onto his lap, careful of his bandaged arm, curling against his chest with trust that never wavered. Her presence felt like undeserved redemption, forgiveness from someone he'd failed to protect. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, words carrying months of dismissed concerns. "You tried telling me something was wrong, and I didn't listen." "You were lonely," Chloe replied with 8-year-old wisdom. "Mom used to say when people are sad, they sometimes can't see clearly." Lucas felt tears burning as he remembered Sarah's voice, her insights about grief distorting judgment. She would have seen through Nina immediately, not from suspicion but understanding that genuine love couldn't be manufactured. "Your mom was very smart, almost as smart as you." Chloe snuggled closer. For moments they sat quietly, reconnecting across emotional distance that grief and misplaced trust had created. "Police said Nina worked for bad people," Chloe said eventually. "Yes. They wanted to hurt our company, steal ideas. Nina was sent to get close so she could access computers and sabotage our work. But why try to kill you? Couldn't she steal computer stuff and leave?" Perceptive question cutting to corporate warfare's heart. Lucas considered explaining adult evil to a child who still believed the world was fundamentally good. "Sometimes, bad people think destroying something is easier than competing," he said carefully. "They thought if I wasn't around, Blake Industries would fail." Chloe processed this seriously. "That's stupid. We have Alex and other engineers. They're smart, too." "You're right," Lucas agreed, realizing his daughter understood business continuity better than corporate raiders. "Our team would have continued even if something happened to me." "But I wouldn't have had my daddy," Chloe said, voice small and vulnerable, breaking Lucas's heart anew. He held her tighter, understanding the true crime hadn't been industrial espionage. It had been assaulting a child's safety and trust. Nina had violated their home, manipulated family dynamics, nearly orphaned an 8-year-old who'd already lost one parent. "I'm here," he said firmly. "I'm here, and I'll never dismiss your concerns again. When you tell me something feels wrong, I'll listen, even if it doesn't make sense to grown-ups. Especially then. You see things differently, and that's not weakness, it's superpower." Chloe pulled back to look at him, blue eyes serious. "Clara says FBI wants to give me special award for helping catch Nina. Would you like that?" She shrugged with 8-year-old nonchalance. "I guess, but I just wanted to keep you safe. That's what families do." Simple statement contained more wisdom about love and loyalty than most adults managed. Lucas realized his daughter hadn't been seeking awards. She'd been protecting family with fierce devotion, children brought to people they loved most. "What do you want to do now? About the company, rebuilding Artemis, everything?" Chloe considered seriously. "I think we should make the new car even safer, with better security so bad people can't break computers. And maybe I could help design some? I'm good at seeing details grown-ups miss." Lucas felt pride and possibility surge. His daughter had demonstrated analytical skills exceeding many professional engineers, combined with intuitive understanding. That could revolutionize safety design. "I think that's excellent. Blake Industries needs a new chief of family safety. Someone whose job is ensuring we protect people who matter most." Chloe's face lit up. "Really? I could have business cards and everything?" "Absolutely. And your first project will be redesigning security to prevent what happened with Nina." As they talked about the future, safer cars and stronger families and companies honoring both innovation and intuition, Lucas felt something shift in his leadership understanding. For years, he'd believed success meant surrounding himself with technical experts. Now he realized wisdom sometimes came in unexpected packages. Sometimes the most valuable consultant was an 8-year-old who paid attention and trusted instincts. Healing would take time, but it had begun with simple recognition. Strongest families were built on trust flowing all directions, where every voice mattered and every concern was heard, even especially when that voice belonged to a child who saw the world more clearly than surrounding adults. In our darkest moments, salvation comes from unexpected voices. Sometimes the smallest among us see what we miss. Who in your life offers wisdom you might be overlooking? 6 months later, the Blake Industries headquarters buzzed with excitement as employees and investors gathered for the official unveiling of the Artemis II. The conference hall overlooked the same mountain testing facility where Lucas had nearly lost his life. But today the view represented triumph rather than trauma. Chloe Blake stood at the edge of the stage, wearing a small business suit that matched her father's and a badge that read, Chief of Family Safety. Her blonde ponytail was neatly braided, and in her hands she held a presentation remote that she'd been practicing with for weeks. "Are you nervous?" Alex Martinez asked, crouching down to her level. The chief engineer had become something of a protective uncle figure since the incident with Nina, checking on both Blakes regularly and ensuring that their family felt secure within the company structure. "A little," Chloe admitted, "but Daddy says the most important presentations are the ones that help keep people safe." From the wings, Lucas watched his daughter prepare for her debut as a corporate presenter. The past 6 months had brought remarkable changes to their family and their company. The Artemis II featured revolutionary security protocols designed through a collaboration between professional engineers and an 8-year-old's insights about human nature. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lucas began, stepping onto the stage to address the assembled crowd. 6 months ago, Blake Industries faced its greatest crisis, not just a business challenge, but a threat to the very values that drive our innovation. He paused, looking out at faces that included investors, employees, industry journalists, and law enforcement officials who had worked on Nina's prosecution. The story had become a cautionary tale about corporate espionage, but more importantly, it had become a testament to the power of listening to unexpected sources of wisdom. Today, we're not just launching a new vehicle. We're introducing a new philosophy of safety that recognizes that protection comes from both advanced technology and human intuition. I'd like my business partner to explain what that means. Chloe walked to the center of the stage with the confidence of someone who had already faced down real danger and emerged victorious. The audience fell silent, intrigued by the unusual presentation approach. "Hi, everyone," she began, her young voice carrying clearly through the conference hall's sound system. "I'm Chloe Blake, and I'm 8 years old. Some of you might remember that I helped catch the bad person who tried to hurt my dad." A murmur of recognition rippled through the audience. The story of the 8-year-old who had warned her father about sabotaged brakes had captured national attention, becoming a symbol of childhood wisdom in an adult world. "But today, I'm not here to talk about bad people," Chloe continued. "I'm here to talk about making cars that protect families like mine." She clicked her presentation remote, and the screen behind her displayed a detailed diagram of the Artemis II's security architecture. The technical specifications were beyond most people's understanding, but the underlying philosophy was beautifully simple. "Adults are really good at building complicated things," Chloe explained. "But sometimes they forget that the most important safety feature is making sure the right people have access and the wrong people don't." She clicked again, showing a comparison between traditional automotive security systems and the Artemis II's revolutionary approach. Where other manufacturers focused solely on preventing external hacking, Blake Industries had designed protocols that monitored for internal threats, corporate espionage disguised as legitimate access. "My dad used to think that being smart meant trusting technology more than people," Chloe said, glancing at Lucas with a smile that contained both love and gentle teasing. "But we learned that the smartest technology listens to people, especially when they're trying to warn you about danger." The presentation continued with Chloe explaining features that had emerged from her unique perspective. Family authentication protocols that required multiple family members to authorize significant vehicle modifications, intuitive warning systems, designed to be understood by children as well as adults, and security monitoring that paid attention to behavioral patterns rather than just technical intrusions. "The Artemis II doesn't just protect you from accidents," she concluded. "It protects you from people who might want to cause accidents. Because the best safety system is one that helps families trust each other and stay safe together." The applause was immediate and sustained, but Lucas noticed that many audience members seemed moved by more than just the technical innovation. They were witnessing something rare in the corporate world, authentic vulnerability translated into meaningful improvement. As Chloe returned to his side, Lucas took the microphone for his closing remarks. "6 months ago, I made the mistake of dismissing my daughter's concerns because they didn't fit my understanding of how the world worked. Today, Blake Industries is stronger because we've learned to value wisdom wherever we find it." He paused, looking at Chloe with pride that went far beyond her presentation skills. "Our new chief of family safety has taught us that innovation isn't just about building better technology. It's about building better relationships with the people who matter most." The audience rose for a standing ovation as father and daughter stood together on the stage, representing not just a successful product launch but a fundamental shift in corporate values. The Artemis II would undoubtedly be a commercial success, but more importantly, it represented proof that authentic listening could transform both families and companies. Later, as the crowd dispersed and the excitement of the launch settled into satisfied accomplishment, Lucas and Chloe walked through the company's design center. The walls were covered with technical drawings and prototype sketches, but now they also featured Chloe's artistic interpretations of safety concepts, child-friendly, diagrams that translated complex engineering into intuitive understanding. "Dad," Chloe said as they paused in front of her latest drawing, a detailed sketch of a car surrounded by invisible shields representing various safety systems. "Do you think Mom would be proud of what we built?" Lucas felt his throat tighten with emotion. Sarah had always believed that their daughter was destined for remarkable things, but even she couldn't have predicted that Chloe would become a corporate executive before her 9th birthday. "I think," he said carefully, "that Mom would be amazed at how strong and wise and brave you've become. And I think she'd be proud that we learned to take care of each other." Chloe nodded solemnly, then brightened with 8-year-old optimism. "Can we get ice cream to celebrate? Chief executives probably deserve ice cream after successful presentations." "Absolutely," Lucas agreed, realizing that the best leaders were those who understood both the weight of responsibility and the importance of celebrating life's sweetest moments. As they walked toward the exit, passing employees who waved and congratulated Chloe on her presentation. Lucas marveled at how much had changed since that terrifying morning 6 months ago. They'd lost innocence and gained wisdom, traded blind trust for careful listening, transformed corporate culture through the honest insights of a child who refused to be dismissed. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities that could only emerge when families chose to protect each other with both technological innovation and unwavering love. And in the end, that combination proved more powerful than any sabotage, more valuable than any corporate secret, and more enduring than any threat that evil could devise. This story reminds us that wisdom doesn't always come with age or experience. Sometimes it comes with love and the courage to speak truth when others won't listen. In a world that often dismisses the voices of the young, the small, and the seemingly powerless, perhaps our greatest strength lies in learning to hear what they're really saying. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone in your life whose voice deserves to be heard, please like this video and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the extraordinary wisdom found in ordinary families. Because sometimes, the most important lessons come from the smallest teachers, and the greatest safety comes from choosing to trust the people who love us most. What voice in your life might you be overlooking? What wisdom are you missing because it comes in an unexpected package? The answer might just save everything you hold dear.